They thought I was too old to fight back. My own son, his wife, plotting to take my home. And worse, the secret treasure hidden inside it. But when the truth came to light, I wasn't the frail woman they imagined. I became their greatest mistake. I have lived in this house for nearly half a century. The Victorian walls have heard my laughter, my grief, and the 1,000 little conversations that made up my life with Arthur. People say it is foolish to live alone in such a large, aging place, but to me, it has never been just a house. It is a record, a museum of our life together. Every photograph, every antique book on the shelf, is a chapter I am unwilling to tear out. That March afternoon had the kind of chill that clings to the bones. I was in the parlor, polishing the glass on a cabinet that held Arthur's collection of antique maps, when I heard the knock. It was firm, deliberate, not the light, hesitant tap of a neighbor. I knew before I opened the door that it would be Michael. My son never calls ahead. He believes a mother's time is always available to her children. This time, Meredith was with him, her leather handbag clutched tightly in one hand like a shield. "Ma," Michael said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. He looked thinner, but in that wiry, restless way that comes from worry, not illness. Meredith followed, her eyes sweeping over the parlor with the same detached appraisal a real estate agent gives to a property she's about to list. I made tea, because that is what my upbringing insists one does, even when the air is already tense. They didn't touch it. Meredith sat upright, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap as though she were waiting for a business meeting to commence. Michael was the one to speak first. "Ma, we need to talk about the house." The words fell like a cold stone in my stomach. "What about the house?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The sporting goods chain. It's gone. We've lost almost everything. Meredith and I are drowning in debt. This house," he gestured around, as if it were a warehouse of excess, "is the only asset left that can cover what we owe. It's worth more than $1 million now. Selling it would solve everything." For a moment, I simply stared at him. My mind went back to the evenings I'd helped him with his school essays, the pride I'd felt watching him graduate, the quiet confidence that my children would inherit not just my possessions but my values. "Michael, this is my home. Your father and I built our life here." Meredith's voice cut in before he could answer. Smooth, cool, practiced. "It's just an old building, Veronica. You're rattling around in it alone. It's impractical. You could get a nice condo, modern amenities, less upkeep. You'd be comfortable. Right now you're being, well, forgive me, but a little stubborn. Old lady stubborn." I felt my cheeks flush. It was not the first time she had spoken to me like I was a relic to be cleared away. But today, there was something sharper beneath her words. Urgency. Perhaps even desperation. Michael avoided my eyes. "I'm not selling," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Arthur and I built a life here. Every room has our history. I'm not ready to pack that into boxes for someone else to toss away." Michael sighed, leaning back. Meredith's smile was thin, professional. "Just think about it," she said, reaching into her bag. She placed a thick, cream-colored folder on the coffee table between us. "Some documents to look over. If you change your mind, we can move quickly. The market is good right now." Her tone was dipped in politeness, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. They left soon after, Michael mumbling something about calling in a few days. When the door shut, I sat alone in the parlor, the folder glaring at me from the table like an accusation. I should have felt only sadness. Instead, there was a sliver of something else. Suspicion. Their urgency wasn't just about money, it was about me. About my place in this family. About whether my voice would still be heard in decisions that concerned my own life. I reached for the folder, then stopped. Not yet. I wasn't ready to read what they wanted me to sign away. Not ready to give them the one thing I had left that still felt entirely mine. April arrived with an unseasonable dampness that seemed to seep into my bones. It wasn't the weather alone that kept me restless. It was the steady drip of pressure from Michael and Meredith, as persistent as rain on a leaking roof. The phone would ring early in the morning, Michael's voice already tense. In the afternoons, they would arrive without warning. Meredith in her tailored coats, speaking as if she were doing me a kindness by checking in, always. There was the same refrain. Think about selling. You're alone here. It's the sensible choice. I would nod politely, but her words stayed behind, echoing in my head, long after she had gone. You're clinging to an old pile of wood. It wasn't just the insult, it was the way she stripped the house of its meaning with a single sentence, as though the years Arthur and I had lived here counted for nothing. The nights were worse. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying each conversation, trying to make sense of the urgency in their voices. Sometimes I would imagine the house as they saw it, just timber and nails, numbers on a real estate listing, and the thought made my stomach turn. This was my life's archive, not a transaction. One gray afternoon, unable to bear the heavy quiet of the parlor, I decided to busy my hands. The basement had been neglected for years, a cavern of dust and forgotten boxes. Arthur had always treated it like his private storeroom, full of shelves lined with old tools, stacks of yellowing newspapers, and the odd relic from our travels. I thought, perhaps, a bit of cleaning might dull the noise in my head. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended, the air growing cooler and mustier. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light. I started with the nearest shelf, wiping away years of grime, stacking Arthur's books into neat piles. Most were titles I recognized: histories, travelogues, maps. My fingertips brushed the brittle paper, and the memories rose unbidden. Arthur bent over a desk, the smell of his ink, the scratch of his pen. Hours must have passed before I noticed it. A faint line in the wood along the far wall, too straight to be part of the natural grain. I set aside the box in my hands and knelt. The panel shifted slightly under my touch, almost imperceptibly loose. My pulse quickened. I pressed my fingers against the edge, and with a quiet scrape, the board came away, revealing a shallow compartment behind it. Inside, nestled in the shadows, was a small chest. The wood was dark, polished, smooth with age, and on the lid, faintly carved, were two letters: A. Arthur Harper. I froze. Arthur had never spoken of anything like this. My hands hovered over it, torn between the instinct to open it and the unease curling in my stomach. The brass clasp was locked, the metal cool against my skin. For a long moment, I simply stared, feeling as if the basement had shifted around me, revealing a piece of my husband I had never known. Awe and curiosity tangled with something colder dread. What could he have hidden here? And why? The house, which had always been a place of comfort, suddenly felt altered, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for me to decide. I tucked the chest back into the compartment, replaced the panel, and stood. My knees ached, but the tension in my chest was sharper. Whatever this was, I wasn't ready to share it. Not with Michael, and certainly not with Meredith. The following week, Meredith's tone changed. She began dropping remarks about managing things before it's too late, and hinted at me forgetting small details, the kind of comments that sound harmless until you realize their purpose. One morning, she laughed softly and said, "You really ought to start letting someone else handle your affairs, Veronica, before there's a mistake you regret." I smiled, but inside, my resolve hardened. They would not get this house. And now, they would not get what lay behind that loose panel, either. Some things, and some truths, had to be guarded in silence. For days, the image of that small chest haunted me. I would be in the kitchen, boiling water for tea, and suddenly picture the faint carving of AH on the lid. At night, when the house fell quiet, my mind would turn over questions I didn't want to ask. What had Arthur hidden so carefully that even I was never told? And why lock it away behind a wall? Arthur was a man of meticulous habits. He kept every receipt in neat envelopes, each labeled in his careful handwriting. If there was a key to that chest, it would not be lying carelessly in a drawer. It would be placed somewhere deliberate, somewhere that made sense to him alone. One damp morning, I began my search in his study. Dust had gathered thick on the desk. I hadn't had the heart to change much since he was gone. His leather-bound journals sat in their usual place, lined up like soldiers. I opened each drawer, finding the small, ordinary relics of his life: fountain pens, reading glasses, old correspondence. Nothing unusual. But as I moved a stack of yellowed envelopes, a smaller bundle of papers slipped out. They weren't letters to friends or family. They were records ledgers, written in Arthur's tidy script. The dates stretched back to the early 1982nd. Each page listed items, coins, manuscripts, carved figurines, alongside numbers in the margins. And there were names I didn't recognize, some scribbled with a discreet dash, others marked only with initials. I read slowly, the meaning dawning on me in waves. Arthur had been dealing in antiques. Yes, but not the polite transactions of a collector. Some of these notes hinted at acquisitions from unverified sources, with cash amounts so large they made my breath catch. I turned a page and found mention of a Lisbon shipment 1984, followed by a note in his hand. Hold for long-term security. Keep off records. It was as if a pane of glass between us had cracked. For 10 years I had kept Arthur's memory polished and intact, like the brass on the banister. Now, I was seeing another side one I hadn't known existed. My stomach churned with a strange mixture of betrayal and disbelief. How much of the life we had shared had been built on something not entirely clean? Still, I felt the old reflex of a historian stirring in me. The need to catalog, to preserve, to understand. I stacked the ledgers in order and slid them into the locked cabinet in my study. If Michael or Meredith found these, no, they must never know. The very next day, the pressure escalated. A man in a crisp navy suit arrived at my door, briefcase in hand. He introduced himself as a lawyer, representing the family's interests. He spoke with practiced courtesy, but every word carried an unspoken threat. He placed a document on the coffee table, a power of attorney, already filled out with my name. "This will make things easier for everyone," he said. "Your son is concerned about some lapses in your memory. It's only a precaution." I kept my hands folded in my lap. "My memory is fine," I said, though my heart was thudding. That afternoon, when I tried to call Christina, the line rang only twice before cutting off. Later, I found out from Zachary that Christina had been trying to reach me for days. But Meredith told her I was resting and not up for calls. A prickling sensation began at the back of my neck and stayed with me all evening. It was paranoia, perhaps, but it was also clarity. I was no longer just the mother they saw as an obstacle. I opened my diary that night, but instead of recording the day's events as I once did, I began noting the exact times they visited, the words they used, even the tone of their voices. Each entry was detailed, like field notes from an excavation. If they wanted to play a game of control, I would keep my own record meticulous, undeniable. Arthur's secrets might have shaken my faith, but they had also left me with a task. And if there was one thing I knew how to do, it was to protect history from those who would twist it to their advantage. In my life, I've learned that protecting your past is not about clinging to old things, but about guarding the values and truths they hold. Family can bring love, but it can also test your strength in ways you never imagined. When others try to rewrite your story, stand firm. Your voice matters, no matter your age. History, whether in books or in your heart, is worth defending. And sometimes, the very things others call useless are what will save you in the end. May arrived like a slow-moving storm, not loud, but heavy, pressing against my days, until even breathing felt like work. The ledgers I had locked away burned in my thoughts, pulling me back toward the chest in the basement. It sat there like a living thing, quietly waiting for me to decide what to do. I searched for the key in every sensible place. First, Arthur's desk drawers, the locked tin box in the wardrobe, even the old cigar humidor he never used. Nothing. My mind kept circling back to Arthur's books. He treated them like confidants. Each volume neatly returned to its exact spot on the shelf. If he wanted to hide something from the world, where better than in the pages of history itself? One humid afternoon, I carried a stack of his antique volumes to the parlor table. I moved slowly, unwilling to damage their fragile spines. Halfway through a 19th century atlas of Europe, I felt something uneven near the binding. I eased the book open, and there, nestled inside a hollowed-out section, lay a small brass key. My fingers trembled. The metal was warm from the pages, as if it had been waiting for my touch all these years. In the basement, The air was cool and damp. The key slid into the chest's lock with a soft click. I lifted the lid, and the scent of old paper and cedar rose to meet me. Inside, layer upon layer, velvet pouches filled with rare coins, leather cases containing delicate manuscripts, folders of appraisals dated decades back. I recognized the names from the ledgers upstairs. The numbers written there were not exaggerated. This was easily worth $3 million. Maybe more. My breath caught, and a wave of emotion swept over me, awe at the beauty of these objects. But also betrayal. So sharp, it left a bitter taste. Arthur had built this secret fortune in the shadows, never telling me, never trusting me with its existence. And yet here I was, its sole guardian. Almost immediately, another fear slid in Michael. If he knew, he would find a way to take it, dress it up, as helping the family, and drain it away, until nothing remained. Meredith would smile as she oversaw the transaction, calling it efficient. I replaced the contents with care, locked the chest again, and returned it to its hiding place. Whatever Arthur's reasons, whatever his sins, this was a legacy worth protecting. I would guard it not for Michael, not for Meredith, but for something larger. A museum. Perhaps. A place where history would be safe from greed. But my resolve only seemed to fuel their urgency. The calls became sharper in tone. Michael's voice, once uncertain, now carried a rehearsed authority. Meredith stopped pretending at warmth. One evening, they arrived with another man. A different lawyer who spoke briskly about guardianship petitions and the burden of managing a property at my age. They hinted at having me declared legally incompetent if I did not cooperate. My health began to fray under the strain. Sleep came in brief, shallow snatches, broken by the sound of footsteps that existed only in my imagination. Meals lost their taste. I caught my reflection in the hall mirror one morning and hardly recognized myself, my face thinner. My eyes ringed in gray shadows. Even the house, my refuge for so many years, began to turn against me. The creaks of the floorboards at night felt like warnings. The parlor, once a room of warm light, now felt like a stage where every conversation was a performance with stakes I could barely comprehend. I moved more quietly through my own home, as if I were the intruder. Every knock on the door made my heart race. I started locking the study when I wasn't in it, checking twice before I left the room. And still, Meredith's words followed me from room to room before it's too late. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I knew one thing. Whatever their timeline was, I had to be ready before they made their next move. And that meant holding on, no matter the cost. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the knock, quick, decisive, with none of Michael's heavy paws or Meredith's theatrical tap. I opened the door and there was Christina, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp in a way that made me both relieved and afraid. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, scanning my face like she was assessing damage. "Ma, you look pale," she said quietly, her hands resting on my arms as though to steady me. "Michael's been giving me updates, but they don't add up." I felt my throat tighten. For weeks, I had been carrying the weight of secrets alone. The chest in the basement, Arthur's letters, the growing threat in my own home. Now my daughter was here, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. We sat in the parlor, the curtains drawn, my voice low as I told her everything. The discovery of the ledgers, the key hidden in Arthur's book, the fortune locked in the chest, and Michael's plan to sell the house under the pretense of helping me. I even told her about the power of attorney documents, slid across my coffee table like a trap. Christina didn't interrupt. She just listened, her expression hardening with each detail. When I finished, she leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This isn't just desperation, Ma. This is calculated." Over the next days, she began digging. Christina was an investigative journalist. Following a trail was second nature to her. She combed through public records, traced phone calls, and before long, she uncovered that Michael and Meredith had been meeting a man named Ron Callahan, a known dealer in high-value antiques, the kind who operated in the shadows. The implication was clear. They weren't just after the house. They suspected something more. Something in these walls. That Friday evening, Zachary arrived for the weekend. My grandson had always been my quiet ally, polite, thoughtful, with a sharp mind that didn't miss much. He was upstairs unpacking when he overheard Christina on the phone, discussing forged documents with a contact from her paper. He came down, his face pale but determined. "Grandma, I want to help." Christina hesitated. But I nodded. I trusted him. Together, they examined the folder Meredith had left weeks ago. Inside were several forms, including the power of attorney. Zachary's eyes narrowed as he compared my supposed signature to another one I'd written that morning. The slant, the spacing, it was different. He took out his phone and began photographing every page, careful to capture the details. "Even if they try to take these back," he said, "we'll have proof." When Michael found out Christina was in town, he arrived the next morning with Meredith in tow. His smile was tight, but his voice had an edge. "So this is what's happening? You're filling her head with lies, Ma? Turning Christina against her own brother?" The accusation hit me like a slap. For a moment, I almost faltered, almost fell into the old habit of defending myself. But Christina stepped forward. "No, Michael. She's telling me the truth, and I've seen enough to know you've been hiding a lot more than that." Meredith's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Careful, Christina. You don't know the whole story." The air was tight, with unspoken threats. Michael's gaze flicked between us. His mother, his sister, and his nephew. And for the first time, I saw something like uncertainty there. He wasn't controlling the room anymore. That evening, after they left in a flurry of veiled warnings, I sat in the parlor with Christina and Zachary. The tension was still there, coiled and waiting. But for the first time in months, I felt something warm pushing against the fear. I was no longer standing alone in this house. And that, I realized, might be the one thing Michael and Meredith had not planned for. The July heat sat heavy over the house, but it was nothing compared to the weight in my chest. By mid-morning, the living room had been transformed into a kind of tribunal. Christina had arranged everything, the chairs set in a semicircle, the dining table cleared, except for a velvet cloth where the chest would sit. To my left was Mr. Hanley, a local historian with sharp eyes and soft hands, the kind of man who treated history as if it could bruise. To my right, Miss Patel, a lawyer Christina trusted from her work. The air smelled faintly of polish and dust. I had opened the curtains, letting the sunlight pour across the table. I wanted the truth to be seen clearly. Michael arrived first, walking in as though he still owned the air in this house. Meredith followed, her heels clicking against the wooden floor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. "What is all this?" Michael asked, his eyes darting between the strangers in the room. I gestured to the chairs. "Sit. We have things to discuss." When they were settled, I brought the chest up from the basement, setting it on the table. The small brass key felt warm in my hand as I turned it in the lock. The lid lifted with a soft sigh, and the room seemed to lean forward with me. Inside, I laid out the contents piece by piece, the pouches of coins, the bound manuscripts, the appraisals, each carefully preserved. Sunlight caught the gold edges of the coins, throwing back a muted shimmer. Michael's jaw tightened. Meredith's expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked quickly over the table, assessing. "These," I said, my voice steady, "are worth millions. They were Arthur's, hidden for decades. I found them by accident, and I've kept them hidden because I knew what would happen if you found out." Christina stepped forward then, placing a neat folder beside the artifacts. "Here's what else we found. Phone records of meetings with Ron Callahan, a dealer with a history of laundering stolen antiquities. And here," she flipped a page, revealing side-by-side images, "are the forged signatures on a power of attorney document. One is my mother's real handwriting. The other is not." Zachary, sitting by the window, spoke for the first time. "I took those photos myself. I was here when they brought the papers." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Michael let out a short, almost broken laugh. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, I was desperate. The business, it's gone." Meredith said, We could fix everything if we just. He stopped, glancing at her. Meredith's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. If you just stopped clinging to the past, she said, turning her gaze to me. You're hoarding history while your family struggles. These relics could change lives. They are not yours to change. I replied, my voice sharper than I'd intended. They belong to a history bigger than this family's greed. Mr. Hanley, who had been quietly examining the coins, looked up. Mrs. Harper, these pieces are extraordinary. Several are rare enough to draw the attention of major institutions. Their value is beyond dispute. And with proper provenance, they could be preserved indefinitely. Meredith opened her mouth, but Michael cut her off with a low groan, rubbing his hands over his face. I just wanted to stop feeling like a failure, he muttered. I thought if I could fix it all. Maybe. He didn't finish. I leaned forward, letting my words fill the room. You tried to erase me from my own life, Michael. You thought you could decide what I'm worth, what my memories are worth. But I'm still here, and I am not signing away my home, my history, or my voice. The room was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the mantel. For the first time in months, I felt taller, my shoulders unburdened. Whatever came next, the balance had shifted. I was no longer the quiet figure they could push aside. I was the one setting the terms. August came in warm and golden, the kind of late summer light that makes even the dust in the air seem purposeful. I woke one morning knowing exactly what I needed to do. The artifacts had been hidden long enough. They deserved air, light, and respect, not to be locked away in fear of greedy hands. By the end of the week, I had signed the papers to donate them to the local museum, under one condition. The collection would bear Arthur's name, and remain accessible to scholars and the public forever. The Arthur Harper Historical Collection would include detailed histories of each piece, appraisals, and the story of how they were preserved. It would be his legacy, and mine safeguarded in the light, not rotting in shadows. The day I met with the museum board, Mr. Hanley stood beside me, his hands folded like a proud parent. Christina and Zachary flanked me, carrying the chest themselves. The board members were in awe, murmuring over the coins and manuscripts. They spoke of exhibitions, school visits, and research grants. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot I had been carrying for months, maybe years, but there was still the matter of Michael. The lawyer had been clear. I had enough evidence to press charges, but as I looked at him, pale and defeated, I thought of the boy he had once been insecure, always chasing approval he believed he'd never earned. I decided not to destroy him. Instead, I offered a choice. Avoid legal charges by volunteering at the museum for a year and attending financial counseling. It was not mercy exactly, but a chance to learn what value truly meant. Meredith did not stay. Humiliated by the public confrontation and the whispers in town, she packed her things within a week and moved to her sister's house in another state. I didn't ask where. I didn't care. Christina surprised me by taking a leave of absence from her job. You've been guarding history alone for too long, she said. It's time someone else stood watch with you. She began working with the museum's archivists, organizing the pieces, writing labels that balanced fact with story. I could see the pride in her eyes each time she explained the provenance of a coin or a manuscript. Zachary, too, found his place there. He accepted an internship with the museum, his curiosity and eye for detail, making him a natural fit. Watching him handle the artifacts with care reminded me of those summers when he would sit cross-legged on my living room floor, listening to my stories about history as though each one were a secret. The house felt different now, lighter, not because the threats had vanished entirely, but because I was no longer living under them. My walls no longer echoed with anxiety. Instead, they hummed quietly with the sounds of my own choosing. The kettle whistling, pages turning, the muffled tick of the mantel clock. One afternoon I sat in my living room, the lace curtains filtering the sunlight into soft, shifting patterns across the floor. Books surrounded me, photographs of Arthur and the children on the mantel, the air faintly scented with lavender polish. My home was still mine. My legacy was no longer locked away in a basement or trapped in someone else's ledger. It was alive, on display, a story told in glass cases, For anyone who cared to listen. I thought about the months I had spent in fear, feeling like an old woman clinging to relics no one wanted. About the nights, lying awake, hearing Meredith's words in the dark. About how small I had felt, how cornered. And then I thought about standing in that living room during the confrontation, my voice steady, my truth laid bare. About the moment I realized I wasn't defending just a house, I was defending the meaning of my own life. I smiled to myself, leaning back in the armchair that Arthur had once claimed as his own. Outside, the summer sun dipped low, casting the room in a warm, forgiving glow. It turned out my so-called useless love for history was never useless at all. It was the very thing that had saved me.